Recording in progress. Yom Gimel, Parshas Chai Yisarach, Chaf Mar Cheshvan, Tav Shalamed Hey. Avram Zochen Baba Yom Bavai Berch Avram Bakoil. Avram was old, he came to days, and Hashem benched Avram with everything. It's known the analysis of the one whose birthday is on Chav Cheshvan, which is the Rebbe Rashab, in a Maimer also entitled by this pasuk, in the Hemshech of Amorim of Tavrei Samach Vav. The Tzar Lahav in Mashoimer Bakoil Stam, that he asks, we need to understand, why does he say that Hashem benched Avram Avinu with everything? Everything is a very inclusive and general term without any specifics. He doesn't explain what exactly he gave him brachas with. Protea brachas. He didn't say the specific brachas. What exactly did Hashem bench Avram Avinu here in Parshas Chai Yisarach? This is especially this makes the question especially acute. Brachas akoydim shenitnu Avram, in the earlier brachas that were given to Avram Avinu, beginning from the first time that the Torah records Hashem speaking to Avram Avinu, and he told him Lech lecha v'yartzcha v'ladcha, and they enumerated all types of brachas. He didn't just say, I will bench you with everything. He says, I will make your name great, and I will give you children, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of details. So Avram Avinu is already used to this concept, and is a known entity that we give brachas to Avram Avinu in details. Brachas in continuation of Hashem's telling Avram Avinu, many brachas were given. Also in the brachas that were said in the psukim of the parsha following it. In other words, in parts of Vayera, the Eibishter benches Avram further. Maybe this is the connection why he's bringing also parts of Vayera, why he's doing this Maimar on this week's parsha, even though it's not parts of Chai Yisarach. Anyway, so therefore, the brachas were nemra brachas beprotis. The brachas were said in specifics, in details. According to this, it's even more emphasized the difference and the distinction over here. Over here specifically is only mentioned that Hashem benched Avram with everything, whereas up till now, all the brachas were in a very general, not in a very general, in a very specific manner. I'll bench you with this, I'll bench you with that, I'll bench you with the other thing. We can add to the above mentioned analysis. In other words, this is something from the Rebbe Rashab's analysis. Now here's something that the Rebbe adds to this. Ustam is, though the idea of Bakoil is a very general bracha and doesn't specify exactly, both in the simple sense of the pasuk and also according to the inner part of the Torah, it's also a very general type of terminology. I'm not sure exactly what the Kniska Leil means, where previously he mentioned this or what it's referring to. Maybe Kniska Leil, that it's a bracha klolis v'stamis. Harimetzinu Midrash Chazal, we find Midrash Chazal shebakoil oila b'gematria bein. The numerical equivalent of the word bein, son, is 52, and bakoil is also 52. Chaf and Lamed, 30 and 20. That's 50, and the base is 2. Bakoil Yitzchak. It's referring to Yitzchak. So that's what it means. Hashem Berech Avram Bakoil means they benched him with Yitzchak, and now he needs to find a Meshidach, like Rashi says. That since he benched him with Yitzchak. So the Rebbe says, seemingly the idea that Bakoil is a very general bracha, a very unspecified bracha, which means it literally includes everything. Hashem benched Avram with everything. Any possible brachas that there were, Hashem benched him. And then you say Hashem benched him with a son. As great as it is to have a son, but that is only one specific thing. So on the one hand, you going from the most general to the most specific. That is two opposites. But since both of them were said in the same word, how they move, and so it's understood. Not only aren't they opposites, just the opposite. There is a bond and there's an association between them. Until they were established and set in one word, to indicate the fact that they're hinted in one word is to indicate the connection between them. Also, we need to understand the two ideas in this pasuk. That in this pasuk itself, of Hashem Berich Avram Bakoil, there are two components, two ideas. Initially, it says that Avram was elderly and he came into his days. After saying that Avram was elderly and came to days, he says Hashem benched Avram with everything. The fact that it's said in such close proximity one to another, because of the indication of the pasuk is she'inin Avram zoken b'bayamim hu akdama v'achana shel ha'achri ze yuchali she'inin davai berch Avram b'koil. That the idea that Avram was elderly and came to days is a introduction and a preparation that following that should be able to be that Hashem benched Avram with everything. The prot is Yosef, top of page Vav, and even more specifically, in the Avram Zaken Gufim, in the idea of Avram being elderly itself. Yeshnei Pirushim, there are two explanations. HaPirush HaPasha, the simple explanation is Sharei Ein Mikri Yotzim De Pshuto, because the pasuk does not ever leave its simple pshat. There may be other layers and other explanations and deeper explanations, but it doesn't mean to negate the simple pshat. The simple pshat is always there. So therefore, that's the simple pshat. The simple pshat remains. Avram was old. That's the simple pshat, the pasuk. And then, on top of that, in addition to that, not negating that Avram was not old, to say, but Pirish Medrash Chazal, but explanation, the Medrash Chazal Avram Avinu Zaken v'Yoshu b'Yeshiva, that Avram Avinu was an elder meaning he was learned, and he was sitting in the yeshiva. Like it says, Avram Zaken ki Zaken zeshakana chachma. As we know, the Maimer Chazal says, what's the meaning of the word Zaken? Zaken is a nutrikun, like the Chazal used the term. It's a combination of words or Rosh Tevis, meaning this is someone that acquired wisdom. So when it says Avram Zaken, is not just that he was older in years, like the Rebbe says often passport, on his identity papers, he's aged and he's older, but he's older meaning in wisdom. And all the details of Avram being older, meaning both in age and years and actual years on this earth, and the idea that he's an elder, that he's learned, that he's Zaken v'Yoshu b'Yeshiva. All of these explanations, hey Magdama lahem shrakosov, their introduction to what it says further in the pasuk, v'avai berch Avram b'koil, that Hashem benched Avram with everything. Another question that I've asked, much close, a pasuk v'Avram Zaken, we're going to the general pasuk that Avram was elderly, etc. It's an introduction and a preparation for the story about the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. That's what it's all coming to. After it says Avram Zaken Babiyam Hashem Berch Avram Bakoil, and like Rashi said, Bakoil is going on a son. Since he has a son, now he has to marry him off. But to such a degree that we see, like every introduction, the introduction is not as verbose as the main part of the story. So the introduction is said in short, like the Rebbe is going to say now, whereas the story of the Shidduch itself is with great elaboration. So the Rebbe says in the brackets on line 10, in such a manner, Shekol Pratein Yonashu Pasuk Avram Zaken V'Goymer Nemru B'Milim Sfiros B'Pasuk Echot. all the details of Avraham being elderly, etc., were said in few words in one pasuk. As opposed to the story about the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka, who barichas gedolah b'yoser is in a very great, lengthy relating it. It's known what the Chazal state, that is more beautiful, more special, the talk of the servants of the forefathers than the Meteras Shalban, than the Torah of the children. In other words, the story of Eliezer, which is only a servant of the Avis, have more information imparted in the Torah Shebiksav and written out more in detail than the halachas that we would be given to the children of the forefathers, to the Bnei Yisrael. The whole story of Eliezer is repeated in the Torah. First, there's what actually happened, and then there's what he related the entire story to Lavan and Besuel. It takes up Shnaim, Shloisha Dapim. It takes up 2-3 columns in a Sefer Torah. Like it's also explained to Amor Chassidus about the value and the importance of the teachings, the Sichos and Shalav de Ovis. The Lechura, seemingly, Mawa Kesher and Yonim, Shal Achrei Hagdama Avram Zokum V'Goymer. What's the connection? That after the preface, after the introduction, that Avram was elderly, etc., and Hashem benched him with everything, comes a lengthy story about the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka. What's the connection between them? Ois Beis, line 21. The point of the explanation of this. Like it's explained and understood from the Maimer of Avram Zokin in that Hemshech of Tavrish Samach Vav, of the Rebbe Rashab. Shebeirach Goimer. Bakoil, he broche kezu she'i efshel lekroisa ela bakoil. When it says that Hashem benched Avram with everything, it doesn't. It's not like Chas v'Sholom Hashem is being stingy on giving you details of all the brachas that Hashem gave Avram. And as we saw earlier, in earlier occasions, the Eibishter did enumerate all the brachas. But just the opposite. The word bakoil is the bracha Hashem gave him is so immense, it's impossible to define it and to limit it into certain descriptions and certain details. The only thing you can call it is everything. It's all inclusive. It's the utmost, highest level. Because the bracha that's beyond the division into details. Though afterwards the bracha does come down into details and details of the details, because just having a general bracha without it having details will not have any effect in this world. And not only does it also come down to details, but the greater the bracha is, the more details. The Rebbe says, line 27, even more so, because it comes from such a high and elevated place. Automatically comes down here below. Multiple details. Because the higher something is, the more it expresses itself in many, many details. Like, for example, the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof is a solid state, but it comes down into many, many things are created from it, because the greater the infinite, if you will, the more details will come out of it. Mikol Malkim, still in all, despite the fact that this bracha is so great and so general, that it is going to come down into very many, many details, still in all, top of page Zayin, being in its initial place, and even higher than its initial place, the way it's in its root before it even comes out. The idea of division into details is not applicable. Therefore it says that Hashem benched him with everything. It's something that includes everything. Since Hashem benched Avram with everything, how they move, and it's understood. Also, the connection of Hashem benching Avram with everything has specifically a shaykhis with Avraham, meaning Sharei ha'or va'akli ha'bracha u'mekabel ha'bracha tzrich liyos masimim zelazeh. The Rebbe says a very interesting point over here about Avram. When you see such a generalized bracha given to Avram, you must say and see how this generalized level is so high and so elevated. That the Avram Avinu is so high and so elevated that he is the appropriate vessel for this very high level. What Avram stands for, what Avram is about, is such a vessel and such a receiver that corresponds to and is appropriate to the bracha that's called with the name Bakoil. And therefore, then initially one needs to explain the idea of Avraham to be able to appreciate, by appreciating the vessel, which is Avram, we could appreciate more of the bracha, which is Bakoil. Ois Gimel, line 11. The idea behind this is, it's explained in Torah at length, Avram Avinu on his own. Before the letter Hey was added to his name at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha, he is a seichel that's concealed from all thought, like the Alter Rebbe says in Torah, which is the reason why it's called Avram. Av means the father. Father goes on seichel, like we know the seichel are considered the parents to the midas, and Ram means that's an exalted level of seichel. And once after being on the level of Avram, nitoisef loy Hey, it was added to Avram Avinu the letter Hey. What is the significance of someone that's on the level of Avram, an exalted intellect? Intellect that's hidden from all thought is added. The letter Hey, shall yoda nasa inyanam shachalamata. Through him becomes the drawing down here below. Like we know that by adding the letter Hey, now Avram Avinu was called, instead of Seichel Hanelam, instead of being removed, exalted, Ram, he was a level of Av Hamoin Goyim. That now he became, he's still the level of a father too, and a patron too, and so on, but to a multitude of nations, meaning that he relates to the lower levels. He draws down from his level to the lower levels. And we know, how is it possible that something that's very high could come down very low? It's when you bring into the picture something that's even higher than him, and that gives the power to be able to come down lower. That's like gufa ilay gadol yoser, through being added to him, an even greater advantage and quality, and because of that, he's able to come down so much further below. And that's what the letter Hey signifies, that additional energy and power that was given to come down lower. So now to explain this further, in line 17, the explanation of this matter about this transition and coming down from the higher to the lower and being imparted an even higher level to be able to do that. The intellect that's concealed from every thought. There are 2 points in this. On the one hand, it's something that has the definition and the categorization of intellect. Despite that, it's still the way the intellect is in such a way that it's concealed from every thought. In other words, on the one hand, it's not intellect, and that's why it's not comprehensible. Obviously, something that's not intellect does not allow itself to be comprehended. The point is, it's defined, it is an idea of intellect, but while being defined and being an idea of intellect, it is so high and so removed that it's concealed from every thought. Okay, Mavur b'maimer, like the Maimer in Samach Vav, it's explained. She'inyin, that this idea should be held as concealed, v'ad shenel m'kol rayin, until it's concealed from every thought. V'af became yesh b'kvar ha'agdor v'amitzis l'nikr b'shem seichol, still in all, as concealed as it is, it still has the definition of being intellect. In general, it's a concealment that has in it existence. That is a concealment of existence. We're going to explain for the next page or so that there are two levels of concealment. One type of concealment there, that the thing that's concealed is in a state of existence, but it's existing in a concealed state. Helam shebemitzias, and then there's a helam she'ein bemitzias, a concealment that has no existence to it. Just to give you the point of it that we've learned in previous Amarim, the difference between fire within a coal versus the, if you want, for lack of a better term, the potential for fire in a flint rock. So first we're talking over here about the helam that's sheyeshne b'metzias, line 25. Maybe the Maimer that Rabbi Rashab brings an example from this. Is from a flame that's inside a piece of coal. Though while it's inside the coal, it's concealed. Therefore, it's an example. When we try to bring an example and an analogy for the 10 concealed spheres, the way the 10 spheres are not in Atzilus. In Atzilus, they're revealed. But the way the 10 spheres are higher than Atzilus, they're considered as the spheres Agnuzas. So that is brought an example to understand it from the flame that's hidden within the coal. Kol Malkim, even though it's concealed, Hareza Helam, top of page Ches Sheyeshim Metzias, it's a concealment that does have an existence to it. To such a degree that you could apply to it the category of being a flame. But the flame is within the coal. So on the one hand, you're calling it a flame. The fact that you're calling it a flame, that means there's an existence of fire over here. On the other hand, it's concealed. This, and going back to what we said before about the Esespheres Hagnuzis, with the Gmasi, he says in the parentheses, Esespheres Hagnuzis Matzilon, and similar to this in the 10 spheres, the way they are hidden in their emanators, they do not seem to be a Metzias whatsoever, meaning they're not seen, they're not revealed. They still have an idea and a category of an existence and something that has a connection with an existence. And then the next part, he's going to say, there's an even higher level of concealment, a concealment that's not in existence. Like the Maimer brings an example of this from fire that's extracted not from a coal, but from a flint rock. Even before they extract from it the fire, it is found within this flint rock, but it's a potential state, it's not real fire. Aval became still a null. It doesn't exist over there in such a way that we can say about it a category of limitation that has defined, and we could identified as fire. That's an idea of fire or flame, etc. That's a concealment of the fire that's in the flint rock. That's a concealment that doesn't is not in a state of existence, as you'll explain in the next paragraph in the Maimer, the differences and what type of way it's concealed over there.